When you look around in the culture, on social media, online, maybe even in the neighborhood, on your Facebook page, I think we can all agree some things feel like they've gone off the rails. And we all, I think, have a feeling about it. The problem isn't that we're confused. It's that we're afraid of what the confusion might ask of us if we leaned in. We live in a moment saturated with information, opinions, certainty, conspiracy theories. It's hard to believe it's the same world now, today, as it was last year. Everyone seems to know exactly what's happening, who's to blame, and what should be done next. And yet, beneath all of that confidence, I think that we're all exhausted. I think a lot of us are afraid of different things. And there's a deep discomfort with not knowing where things are going, not knowing if it's the right direction, not knowing if we made the right choices, and not knowing what we actually believe about what's happening around us. Confusion isn't neutral. It creates tension, and tension demands something of us. What if the discomfort that we're trying so hard to escape in all this confusion is actually what's trying to teach us? I believe that some of the hardest moments in our lives aren't moments when we actually make a decision. It's actually before the decision. There are these moments of inner conflict when what we believe and what we've been taught and what we're experiencing suddenly no longer line up. You feel it when the story that you've believed for so long, that you've trusted, suddenly stops making sense. When the leaders that you've been following, those that you relied on, suddenly start to disappoint you. When the values and beliefs that you have held on to for so long suddenly start to cost you something real. Our tendency is to, instead of slowing down and listening to that tension, we rush to resolve it, to quiet it. So we pick a side, we harden a belief, and we simplify the narrative to make it a little bit easier and a little bit more palatable. And there's a name for that tension that we're all trying to escape when we don't know what to do. It's called cognitive dissonance. I'm Corie Weathers, and this is Restored. Cognitive dissonance is the psychological discomfort we feel when our beliefs conflict with evidence around us, when our values conflict with our own behavior, when our loyalty conflicts with our own conscience. It's one of the many cognitive biases that I've been fascinated with, especially since writing Military Culture Shift, when so many of us deal with cognitive dissonance, not only within our careers, over our adulthood, but honestly, we face it and feel it every single day. As human beings, we are wired to reduce any discomfort we're feeling internally quickly. The fastest way to reduce it is rarely, though, the healthiest. Because instead of changing behavior on the outside, which costs us something, and we'll examine that in just a moment, cognitive dissonance is the theory that when we experience internal incongruence, when something is happening around us that goes against our values, our beliefs, or what we have come to believe to be true, that it's so much easier to change what we believe about the situation than challenge whatever it is that's creating or causing the internal conflict. So we rationalize, we minimize, we reframe, because it's easier to adjust the story in our minds than to restructure our lives. To challenge what is happening on the outside of us that's making us feel uncomfortable costs relationships, hard conversations, evolving what we know or what we've always been taught, challenging some of the institutional stories that have been passed down. And that's so hard and creates even more conflict within us that it's just so much easier to subtly, incrementally change what we believe instead. Over time, this becomes a habit for each one of us. But when you multiply that across the culture, an entire society can change. Evolving their beliefs, evolving their values that once held them together. Suddenly, the culture becomes unrecognizable. Look around and you'll see it everywhere. Radical statements that are thrown out flippantly, evidence of just how far our beliefs and our values have evolved. Messages like all immigrants are taking advantage of the economy, or that our faith leaders must have it right because they must know something that I don't know, or the news must be trustworthy, or my side is the moral side. These beliefs, these statements don't stick around or pass around because people are malicious or because they're naive. They persist because questioning them would require something of us. It might require conflict with your family or with your community, loss of belonging, admitting that we are wrong, changing how we vote or spend or speak or live or parent or how we work or where we live or how we use our voice. And all of that cost feels way too high. So instead, most of us resolve the tension in another way. We just avoid the question. We avoid the inner conflict, we sweep it under the rug, and we let it be. While I was exploring cognitive dissonance in the military community and in our system for how it shapes our beliefs about our career, about our views of service, about how we view promotion and chasing the dangling carrot of retirement, I came across Viktor Frankl. Now, I had heard of Viktor Frankl for a long time. I've even read his book, Man's Search for Meaning. But something stood out to me in a new way as I saw the impact of cognitive dissonance on our world and on our lives individually. If you don't know, Viktor Frankl is a Holocaust survivor and a psychiatrist. In fact, he survived by lining up rocks in the dirt and pretending that they were his students, his future students, and he would visualize him surviving the Holocaust, that he would teach his students what he learned from surviving from this moment. One of the things that Viktor Frankl teaches is that he believed that inner tension is not a pathology. He described it as the birthplace of meaning, that tension can be your teacher. He argued that mental health is not about eliminating tension or even escaping it. It's about learning how to live responsibly in that tension. Now, of course, we're not talking about building a house there and living in a constant state of confusion. It's about learning to grow comfortable with the fact that living in your life and in this world is going to have you bump your values and your beliefs and your morals against other people's values and morals. He's simply saying that we can lean into it as a teacher. And instead of being afraid of it, we can grow comfortable with the fact that tension is going to happen. In fact, it can be something that helps you grow into a better version of yourself if you are willing to lean in instead of avoiding it. It's an opportunity to lean in and get curious and ask yourself, why do my beliefs and values feel threatened right now? Is there another way to look at the situation? Is someone or something or an institution or community or a person asking something of me that goes against my morals? And is this an opportunity to challenge and set boundaries, or is this an opportunity to evolve my thinking? Either way, it's about making the conscious choice instead of evolving your beliefs simply out of escaping the dissonance. Frankl wrote that human beings need the tension between who we are and who we are becoming. He described, and this makes sense, especially coming from a Holocaust survivor, that life is less about comfort and it's less about certainty and more about purpose. Purpose, he believed, is discovered when we stop asking, what do I want from life? And start asking instead, what is life asking of me? That question can feel unbearable for a culture addicted to clarity, certainty, and being right, because it requires patience, humility, and the courage to lean in, to accept the challenge, and to ask, what might the tension within me be teaching me? If you've followed me on my past podcast, the Corie Weathers podcast, I finished that podcast season and ultimately closed down that podcast with talking about the importance of the messy middle. The messy middle is this place, especially in relationships, where we are in between the extremes of black and white thinking, of right and wrong thinking, that living your life in relationship to others is going to feel like living in the messy middle. Very few things are certain in the messy middle. You hold a little bit of truth, and so does someone else. And learning to navigate in that messy middle is learning to sit with and grow comfortable with the idea of internal incongruence and tension. Because it is in that tension that we are able to have the courage and the curiosity to accept that there's a portion of what is inside of me that is important, that is valuable, that I need to ask deeper questions about what I believe and the values that are important to me, and also be curious about what's happening with you and what you're inviting me to think about, what you're inviting me to evolve on. And in that messy middle, no one person is right, no one person is wrong, and we actually learn to work together and listen better. Our identities are often very much attached and sometimes enmeshed with the culture that we are brought up in, whether it's our national culture, whether it's the faith system you grew up within, whether it is the family and the family stories and narratives that were passed down. Richard Rohr wrote Falling Upward, a spirituality for the two halves of life. And he talks about the first half of life being an integral stage that all of us have to move through. And it is in that first half of life that we learn about structure, we learn about our values, we learn and pick up how to be an adult, how to navigate relationships, the importance of having a faith tradition, the importance of having those moral guardrails, the importance of following rules, the value of having authority. He basically describes that the first half of life is all about structure, all about learning to follow the rules. But the second half of life is about respecting the structure and the rules, but then learning how to appropriately break those rules by asking the harder questions. And this is where we start to feel that internal conflict and incongruence, when what we were taught starts to feel like it's not quite fitting with what we're seeing, with behavior on the outside, watching our world, or what the world around us is asking us to believe or asking us to do or not do. What makes the messy middle so messy? While we are holding on to our foundational values, the beginning structure that really gives us that inner peace, confidence, security, there's another human being in front of you that's asking something of you, that's asking to be loved, that's asking to be heard. And as you are simultaneously being asked to stand your ground, you're also being asked to sacrifice, to be humble, to open your mind to someone else's perspective. And so the messy middle feels messy. And this is the internal conflict, the incongruence. What we want to do is escape it altogether. And the fastest way to escape it is to swing the pendulum to the extreme. I must be right. And going back to the certainty and the security of your beginning structure, the beginning values that you once had. And sometimes that is the right decision for setting boundaries, which is why this is so complicated and why Frankl is asking us to lean into it as a teacher when we feel that discomfort. It's a time to be curious and ask questions in order to discern, is this where I hold my ground, where I don't evolve my beliefs? Or is this what Richard Rohr talks about in the second half of life, where we have the permission, having lived in that structure, having had that security, that the foundation is strong enough for us to ask hard questions and for us to maybe even question some of those values, some of that foundation, in order to help us grow, to help us become more loving, and to help us make sacrifices and evolve our thinking. But if we're not careful, and if we're too quick to numb out that discomfort, if we don't lean into it as a teacher, we run the risk of instead just evolving our beliefs in the most lazy way, like a frog boiled in water. And then one day we wake up and we don't recognize who we are. In Military Culture Shift, I referenced the Nazi doctors during the Holocaust, not to shock, but to provide us a warning. These were educated professionals who resolved unbearable moral conflict, not by changing their actions or challenging what they were asked to do, Instead, they simply changed their beliefs along the way. These subtle micro steps that evolved them from valuing human life to gradually themselves being unrecognizable. Step by step, they shifted their beliefs. They silenced their conscience in the name of duty, science, obedience, loyalty, ideology, belonging. This is not about comparison. This is about looking at human behavior, looking at patterns, learning from those patterns, and learning what we are collectively capable of. These doctors did not wake up evil. They did not start malicious. Each day, each moment, each microstep was an invitation to lean in and be curious of what they were being asked to do on the outside and how it conflicted with their own values and beliefs, and whether it was the environment they were around, the culture that they were around, whatever it threatened, whatever it could cost them by asking the hard questions, it was much easier to just evolve their belief instead. Most moral failure does not begin with cruelty. It begins with avoidance. When we as individuals lose the ability to tolerate and sit with that inner conflict, we will become rigid. When cultures and communities lose that ability, they become dangerous. A culture that cannot sit with questions demand instant answers instead. They punish doubt, reward certainty, and dehumanize disagreement. Over time, moral responsibility erodes. So what does it look like to resist that pull, to numb out and escape the cognitive dissonance? What does it look like to lean into it, to get curious and let it be your teacher? There is so much wonderful research, especially from Besser van der Kolk, on the body keeps score and how our bodies are often telling us something before our brains or our emotions can even catch up. Sometimes your body will tell you when something feels off, when you feel uncomfortable, when the inner incongruence is inviting you to ask some questions. Let's see if we can take a moment to practice that right now. I want you to think of a situation that maybe makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe it's a conversation you've had with family, a conversation you've had with friends, even a conversation you've had online. Now, to make this a little bit easier, I'm not talking about a relationship where you need to set a safety boundary. This would be one of those situations where somebody's asking you to do something or be something unsafe. And you know, based off of your values, based off of the structure from that first half of life, that it's not healthy, and you know you need to set a boundary instead. Those are those times where you lean in, you ask hard questions, and you provide with certainty a necessary boundary, and not a place where you evolve your beliefs. I'm talking about more of a messy middle conversation. One of those where somebody's asking you to listen to their side of the story, and yet it's not exactly the side of the story that you want to accept or that aligns with your values or aligns with the way that you've been brought up. Surely you can think of an example. This is one where we lean into the discomfort, not because we're going to evolve our beliefs on it, because I think if we go into it thinking that, we're going to distrust this process. We're going to see the opportunity to be curious and allow the dissonance to be our teacher to suddenly become threatening, something that could, quote, change us or evolve us into somebody that we don't want to be. Instead, let's pause for a minute and let's remember that there's some key values that I think we all agree with as humans. We value human dignity. We value the importance of being seen and seeing others. We value listening, which means we value being heard, and we want to try to listen to others better. I think we all value the importance of kindness in our world. Perhaps these are some beginning values that we can all agree with are safe, and so perhaps we start with agreeing with that. Now, I want you to think about a conversation, an invitation to listen to someone else's perspective, some kind of messy middle situation where you know you've got something within you that feels right, and yet someone else is asking you to hear their side or see that they are bringing truth to you as well. And maybe it's an uncomfortable feeling in your body, maybe an uncomfortable feeling in your mind or in your emotions. Maybe it feels a little even scary to even entertain whatever it is that they're asking you to hear. This is the kind of messy middle conversation that's important for us to lean in and get curious about. Do you have one? Perhaps in this scenario, you feel in your body defensiveness, a desire to be certain, to cling on to what is right, what you believe to be right, the temptation to be dismissive, argumentative. Instead, I want you to pause for a moment and just ask yourself, what is it that I'm uncomfortable with in my body? What is it that I'm trying to escape in this moment by dismissing it all, by being defensive and shutting down the conversation and shutting down what I'm hearing? Here's a hard one. What would it require of you if you took it seriously? What they were asking. Who would you have to disappoint if you actually leaned in, listened, and practiced some of those values we just said we agreed on? Things like kindness, seeing another person, listening to another person, valuing them with human dignity. Who would it disappoint if you leaned in? Who would question you? If someone else was watching this interaction, what would you be afraid of? What if in that moment, your heart suddenly grew with love, not total agreement, just love, just kindness? What would it require you to change after that? You don't need to have answers to all of these right away. The process is so much more important than having the answers and knowing what exactly is right and what exactly is wrong. Meaning often emerges through patience with yourself, grace with yourself, grace with the other person, and learning to sit in the messy middle, learning to sit in the cognitive dissonance. Peace, conflict resolution is not always about agreement. It's not always about having sudden clarity. And peace is definitely not about the absence of conflict. Peace is actually the ability to live with inner conflict without becoming cruel, rigid, or living in fear. If we want peace in our homes, our faith communities, our institutions, in our community, if we could recover the courage to sit with hard questions personally, relationally, culturally, we might begin to build something different. Not a culture of louder answers, but one capable of wisdom. Not a peace built on denial, but a peace rooted in responsibility. This is the hard work ahead of us, and it must begin quietly within. Every meaningful life, every healed relationship, every restored culture begins with someone willing to stay present to the question of what confusion might be inviting us to learn about ourselves. What if we treated inner conflict not as failure, not as something to fear, but as a teacher, like Viktor Frankl said? What if we believed that peace, real peace, not in a naive way, emerges not from certainty and having all the answers, but instead from courage? This is the work of restoration, and it starts wherever you are willing to pause, listen, and choose what shapes you. If this episode stirred something in you, I would love to hear your story. You can record a short voice memo and send it to restored@CorieWeathers.com. If you'd like to continue to explore my work through my writing, reflection, and be notified of future episodes, you can find all my links in the show notes. I'm Corie Weathers, and this is Restored.